We're going for it. All right, welcome back. Thank you so much. We've got, I know people are going to just keep joining us over the next few minutes. So if you were with us at the end of the last session, you heard me say that we had a little bit of a snafu with our State Department of Education live presenters, and they ended up doing a recorded presentation for us, which was great yesterday, and we have that to share with you. So I'm going to kick that off in just a sec here, and then at the end of that, it runs about 40 minutes. I will tell you it is chock full of information. And so we wanted to make sure, because how much information is in it, that we were able to do some sort of Q&A, and we will be doing a live Q&A at the end of the presentation with Angela Lindig, who, if you were with us, you just heard from this morning from Idaho Parents Unlimited. The people who put together the presentation from the State Department of Education are Susie Ludwig, Jeff Brandt, and Karen Striegel, and they will introduce themselves in the live presentation. But I just want to acknowledge that it was great of them to put this together, and really it's the next best thing to them being with us this morning. We just will have the Q&A live, which will be great. So let me go ahead and kick that off. Give me a minute to share my screen and we will get started. And we'll see in about 40 minutes. Oh, I don't think it's going to play it. Hold on a sec. Oh boy. Okay. Give me a minute. Yeah, I'm going to have Michelle pull it up, because it does not, it was just playing a minute ago, but it does not seem to want to play on my computer right now. I'm going to do a stop share. All right, I guess I'll get you to confirm for me in the chat that you are not seeing the video and that we should bring it up on somebody else's computer, and we can get it to you shortly. And there's Michelle. By the way, big round of applause for Michelle, because she's making this whole conference work. Okay. We're really close. Oh, all right. Oh yeah, I think we're just having a share issue. Hold on. You got it? Yeah. Yay. Okay, we took it down on purpose. We're about to launch it for everybody.
Welcome to our presentation, Parent Voice in Special Education. Voices Carry, using your voice, making an impact. And thanks to the Idaho Federation of Families Parent Education Conference for having us here today. My name is Jeff Brandt, and I'm a dispute resolution contractor with the Idaho State Department of Education.
And my name is Susie Ludwig. I'm a special education supervisor for the middle schools in the West Ada School District. And Karen Striegel had planned to be with us for this presentation, but there was a scheduling snafu and she's not able to attend. But she's the special education coordinator and at the Idaho State Department of Education.
Our outcomes for our presentation today are to help parents understand the roles and responsibilities in the special education process, to learn how to participate in IEP meetings, know where to go when you have concerns, to understand Medicaid school-based services in the special education process, where to locate resources, and where to go to ask questions. Topics today: parent roles and responsibilities under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, parent participation in the IEP process, the dispute resolution office resources, and Medicaid school-based services. If you have questions after the presentation, please contact Michelle at her email here. Then she will send your questions to us and we will be happy to get them back to Michelle, who can then forward the responses to you. We apologize that we're not able to do this live. That recording it was the only way we could work it with our schedule. So we hope that this works out for you. So what is the IDEA? The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act is a law that makes available a free and appropriate public education to eligible children with disabilities throughout the nation and ensures that special education and related services are available to those children. The power of parent participation. The evidence is clear and consistent. When schools and families work together, school learning and outcomes improve. So do children's attitude toward school, their social skills and behavior, and the likelihood that they will take more challenging classes, and most importantly, pass those classes. This holds true across families of all economic, ethnic, racial, and educational backgrounds, and for students of all ages. Given the power that family involvement has to influence how our children achieve in schools and in life, it's not surprising that the nation's special education law, the IDEA, strongly supports parents' rights to be involved in their special education that their child receives. Parents have the right to participate in meetings related to evaluation, identification, and educational placement of their child. Parents have the right to participate in meetings related to the provision of free and appropriate public education and are entitled to be members of any group that decides whether their child is a child with a disability and meets educational criteria for special education and related services. Parents are entitled to be members of the team that develops, reviews, and revises the IEP for their child. If neither parent can attend the IEP meeting, the school must use other methods to ensure their participation, including conference calls or Zoom meetings or whatever it might take to allow the parent to participate. Parents are entitled to be members of any group that makes placement decisions for their child. If neither parent can attend the meeting where placement is decided, again, the school must offer other methods of participation. I think it's especially interesting to note that successful partnerships between schools and families grow over time in a climate of mutual respect and consideration, where there's a strong and common focus on the well-being of the child. Here's some resources as a parent. If you have some questions or concerns, you feel like you need some support. The Center for Parent and Information Resources, there's the link for them, and Idaho Parents Unlimited office here in Boise, but they can be reached statewide at that number, and there is as their information contact for their website. If you have questions about the roles and responsibilities of schools and parents, here is the information for the Dispute Resolution Office at the State Department of Education. Kimberly Shaner is the Dispute Resolution Coordinator, and Emily Sommer is the Dispute Resolution Program Specialist. You can reach out to them either at their phone number or email there.
So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your role as a parent in the development of the IEP. But before we get going with that, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the process that we go through as a team to determine whether a student requires special education services. So some of you have, I'm sure, have already been through this process and have been a member of an IEP team for years, and there might be others of you who are new to the process altogether. And so I just thought if everyone has the same bit of information, it is helpful. In order for a student to be determined eligible for special education services, there's a very specific eligibility process. In all states, there are both federal and state laws, policies, and procedures that provide us with specific guidelines for all processes in special education. So it involves much more than just assessments. There are observations, there's valuable parent and teacher input, we do a file review, and once all that information is gathered, in order to make a decision to determine whether a student is eligible for special education services, there's a three-prong process that the team considers when determining whether a student is eligible for special education. So students must fall within, they must meet the state disability criteria and fall within one of 14 eligibility categories. And just because a student has a diagnosis doesn't necessarily mean that they are eligible or need special education services. And for this reason, there are two more prongs that the team considers when we're determining eligibility. The next prong is what we call adverse effect. And this is where, as a parent, you can assist the team by providing information regarding how, from your perspective as a parent, you see the academics or behavior adversely affects the student's educational performance. What we are looking for is how is the school performance impacted by the disability? And so in this case, you would be sure to share what you see at home, because sometimes what we see at school is a little bit different than what parents see at home, and that's still important information for the team to consider. And then it's also important for us as a team to look at how similar is this student to their peers in the classroom. And classroom data assists us with consideration of this section. And then the third prong is, does the student require specially designed instruction? And that's what special education is. Do they require specially designed instruction to develop skills, or are they just in need of some accommodations to level the playing field as a result of the disability? So when we talk about this process, we look to see, do they have a disability? Is there an adverse effect? And does the student need specially designed instruction? And I want to stop for a second and talk about how, as a parent, when you go through this process, it can be and feel very emotional, because the team is hyper-focused, of course, on your child, but we're also looking not only, we don't spend as much time talking about a student's strengths as when we're looking at this eligibility process and we're looking at the adverse effect, we're talking about the disability, and does the student need specially designed instruction? We are looking at all of their skill deficits and their needs. And as a parent, to sit down and talk with a group of people about their child's needs can feel very overwhelming and emotionally draining. And so it's just important that you know that we understand that, but part of the process is to really identify those skill deficit and need areas, and that's okay. So then the next part is, once we determine that a student does meet eligibility criteria and they need special education services, the next part in the process is to develop what's called an IEP, an Individualized Educational Program. On the next slide, we're going to talk about required members of this IEP team. This is almost all decisions in special education are done as a team. And the important part of that is ensuring that everyone at the table is allowed to provide some input. And you as a parent are probably the most important member of that team. And so that's why I listed you here first. But in addition to you, we have a general education teacher that's required, a special education teacher or related service provider, and a district representative. And that's an administrator who has the authority to authorize decisions that are made by the team. And then often as students get older, we invite them and want them to participate and give their input as well. And then any others who are knowledgeable individuals at the discretion of the parent or the district. When we are developing an IEP, it's important to remember that it's a yearly plan. We revise it at least, if not more often, once a year. The whole goal is to ensure that the student has access to free and appropriate public education, and we call that for short FAPE. And FAPE is provided for students aged in the state and aged 3 to 21. So students can attend school if the team determines all the way until the semester after they turn 21. We look at what does the student need to make reasonable progress in general education, and it's always based on evaluation and current classroom performance data. So let's talk about what's in an IEP. The IEP starts with the present levels, we call it, it sounds silly, but FLAP, and it's the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. This is part of the area where we talk about the student's strengths and we look at it under the guise of each specific skill area that we're addressing. So as a parent, you will be asked either prior to the meeting or at the meeting to share your concerns about that skill area. And then we add the parent concerns to this page of the IEP. This section of the IEP also includes a statement regarding the impact of the student's disability and how that impacts the student's learning. After we have identified the student's strengths and their needs, then we write measurable goals. And that includes how we will measure progress towards those goals and how often we will report that, which is typically quarterly. Once we identify goals in each area of concern, then that's how we decide on services. What services or how much services, how many minutes of instruction are required in order for that student to meet the goals on the IEP. So once we've talked about the current progress, we've gotten your input, we've identified the goals and the services, the next thing we do is look at what classroom accommodations and state testing and district testing accommodations does a student need in order to participate. So that's where we talk about all sorts of how the disability is impacting the student in the classroom, and then what can we do to provide some supports, accommodations or modifications for the student so that they can access their general education setting and the instruction as much as possible. And then some students, if the behavior is identified as impacting their learning or the learning of others, we write what's called a behavior intervention plan for. And that plan is written for what is the area of concern in terms of behavior, what replacement skills do we want the student to learn, and then what as staff are we going to do to support the student learning those replacement skill behaviors. And then as students turn age 15, we shift a little bit of our focus on the IEP towards what is the student going to do when they leave high school? Will they go to college? Will they get a job? And what do we or what can we as an IEP team do to help the student be prepared for that transition from high school to adulthood? So I thought it would be helpful for you as a parent to see kind of what an IEP meeting agenda might look like. And so we always want to identify so everyone at the meeting is aware of how long do we have to talk about this. Now, please know, you might be attending a meeting that's scheduled for 30 minutes or an hour, or we might say we have a ton of issues that we want to talk about. Maybe we're going to schedule 2 hours. We want to make sure that we stick to that timeline because afterwards, then people tend to start to get a little bit jumpy and they might rush decisions. So please know, if the team doesn't get all the way through the agenda, it is perfectly okay for that team to schedule a follow-up meeting and then continue working through the agenda together. So basically, we'll start out by introducing all the team members. We talk about the purpose of the meeting. As parents, you're offered what's called procedural safeguards, and we ask at the outset if you have any initial questions. And then here you can see just going through the IEP, and in the order that I shared what's in an IEP, we just talk and go through the IEP together and add information as we go through the draft. So as a parent, how can you provide input? And I think it helps to be prepared ahead of time to know what the team will ask you when you come to be a member of that team. We'll ask you to share strengths and weaknesses. We'll also ask you to share if you have any medical or school background information, because a lot of times a student, I do middle school, so a student's already been in school for 6, 7, 8 years before I have a chance to meet with the team. And so we might ask, what strategies have been tried that were really successful in the past, or what has been tried that didn't work very well? That is really important information for the team to know so that we can make the best plan and decisions possible for the student. And then it's also important for you to be able to share your concerns and long-term hopes for your student, and then any other information that you feel comfortable sharing that might impact your student's learning. Again, I just want to, I said this already before, but when we're talking about and coming together as a team, and when you're preparing for your IEP team meeting, it is important for you to understand that it's okay to feel emotions. It's okay for you to share that this is a hard process for you, or that you're excited to meet with the team. And also, you might feel a little bit defensive, or even we have parents who, because all we're doing is focusing on the negatives and the needs, how do we make things better? Sometimes you can even feel a little bit guilty to think that because we ask questions about, tell me, does he do these things at home, or how do you respond? What works best when he does this? What works best? How do you handle the situations? We're really just looking to make sure that we have the best information possible so that we can develop a good plan. But sometimes when we ask those questions, it does feel a little bit personal, and it's okay for you to say, I need to think about that, or can I email you later if it feels kind of uncomfortable at the time. That's perfectly okay. As a parent, ways that you can prepare for a successful IEP team meeting is to think of positives. I want you to think about positive experiences that your child has had in school. Think about things that teachers or school staff, principals have done that have helped your child. Also, write down any concerns, because when you come, just as like when you go to the doctor, sometimes you go to a doctor's appointment and you leave and someone says, how did it go? And you're like, I can't even remember one thing that he said to me. So sometimes it's helpful to write down your concerns ahead of time. That way you can be sure that the team has addressed all of those concerns. But also, if we don't get through the list of your concerns, you can share them with the group and get a response. And then also, I want you to know that it's okay for you to ask for a draft of any paperwork that the team will be reviewing ahead of time. And I think the helpful part of that is you as a parent need some time to kind of digest the words. And even though it is a draft, and as a team, we may change the words on the page, it's helpful for you to know what will be said in the meeting so that ahead of time, if you have specific questions regarding the draft, you can write those down and be prepared. If you're crazy busy and you don't have time to review the draft, it's still okay to ask for the draft, and it's okay for you to say, I didn't have a chance to review it. We just want to make sure that you have an opportunity to request the draft ahead of time. A few things to remember. IEP meetings can be stressful. A lot of times, especially this is a conference on mental health, when we're talking about challenging behaviors, it can feel personal, and everyone at the table just wants to do what's best for the child. But sometimes we have to have some tough conversations as we are writing the plan to talk about what might be the best strategies. And so just know that it's okay for you to feel a little bit of stress, but that other people at the table might also feel stress as well. Waiting for the meeting to start can sometimes be uncomfortable. So it's okay for you to turn and make small talk and chat, or say, how do you know my son or daughter? Because sometimes when we're all sitting around the table or on a Teams meeting staring at each other's faces, it can feel a little awkward and weird. Like I already said, it's okay for you to ask for drafts ahead of time. And if you have concerns, and we say this to school staff as well, be ready to problem solve. Come with ideas of ways that you think might help, because that just gives the group a little step up for, I've thought a lot about this, and here's, would you guys be willing to try this strategy or idea? And then if you have serious concerns, and sometimes when parents, I'm a special education supervisor, so often when people contact me, they already have concerns and feel frustrated about something, it's okay to ask for a little small group planning meeting ahead of time to talk about the concerns. And then that way, when we get to the bigger group with all of the required team members, then we can really spend time addressing the concerns and focusing on solutions. The next thing is, it's just important to remember that all decisions are made as a team. So we say these are team decisions. So why is this important? It's important because when you as a parent make a request, while as a parent you might think, okay, that's easy, you should just be able to tell me yes. If it changes the IEP, then we have to consider your request, and that requires a team meeting or a team to have that discussion and make sure that your input is considered. So just making sure that you understand that these are team decisions that we're making. So one person isn't responsible for making that decision. We make them as a group. And I felt the need to include this just because often as parents, or even sometimes general education teachers or special education teachers will say, why can't we just take him out of that class? Why does he have to have general education math? It's something that he really struggles in. Well, it's important to understand that all of our students are general education students first, and general education instruction is important for all of our students to receive as much as is possible. When we remove students from receiving that general education instruction, sometimes those decisions cause the student to be even further behind, and we just want to make sure that as much as is possible when we're making decisions, we still allow them to access the general education setting, and if they're not able to access the setting, if at the very least they're able to access the instruction and the curriculum and the content standards. Okay, and then the next thing is there are times when you might feel rushed, or you don't agree, or you feel frustrated, or you don't feel like the team is understanding your concerns, or they're misunderstanding your concerns. It is okay to say, I don't feel like you're listening to me. I don't feel like you understand what the concern is. So it's okay for you to, after the meeting, share a follow-up phone call, or you could put your ideas in writing and share an email afterwards. If you can, try to be nice and say, hey, we ran out of time. I didn't feel like we got through my list of concerns. But we always want you to start at the lowest level. So you'd always start with the school team, and that's the special education case manager, the school counselor, the special education administrator, and allow them an opportunity to address your concerns. If you feel like those concerns aren't addressed either in an appropriate amount of time or addressed properly, then you can feel free to contact district staff. Now, in our district, we have special education supervisors, but there are some smaller districts that just have maybe just a special education coordinator or special education director. So whoever the next in line is at the district office is always there for you and willing to answer your questions and help the team. And then if you're still feeling like you aren't being heard, or your questions aren't being answered, and you have even more need to get someone else involved, then that's where the state supports come in, and you can request what's called a meeting facilitation or mediation. And Jeff's going to talk a little bit about that process next. And so I forgot to say, here's my contact information. Again, my name is Susie Ludwig, and I work for the West Ada School District. If you have questions and I am able to answer them, I'm more than happy to email you back or take your phone call. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Susie. I'm going to talk now about the Dispute Resolution Office here at the State Department of Education. And if you didn't take anything else from what Susie was talking about, boy, the process can become complicated. And I know that special education teachers and directors across the state do their very best to try to help walk parents through the process and help them understand it so that good team decisions can be made for your children. But sometimes things happen that maybe the state might need to get involved to help with that facilitation, mediation, or what that might be. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what that looks like here. So here in the Office of Dispute Resolutions, we believe that conflict can equal opportunity, and certainly that here in the Dispute Resolution Office, that we're always neutral, that we believe in fairness, we believe in transparency, and that good outcomes are always child-centered and are legally defensible. When we receive phone calls or request information here, there are several different avenues that we can try to direct parents through to help resolve what the issues might be. Number one is that informal conflict resolution. Sometimes that's just a parent calls, they're frustrated, they don't understand what just happened at that meeting or what's going on. And we can kind of help explain what that is, direct them to where the guidelines are so they can better understand what maybe just happened or what's going to happen. And sometimes, as Susie indicated, resolving things at the lowest level, sometimes that's just this office getting the parent back to the right person at the school to talk to. Did you talk to the supervisor? Did you talk to the principal? Who have you talked to? Maybe you need to go back with this information that I'm going to share with you today, and have another conversation with the school. And that's always the goal, is that things can be resolved back at the lowest level possible. But sometimes that doesn't happen. And that's where we have facilitation, mediation, state complaint, and due process hearings, which I'm going to talk about next. But before I get to that, I do want to share some of this comparative information on the processes that we have and the numbers that we've seen in the dispute resolution office. So going back, you can see way back to 2004, 2005, we had 6 due process hearings, 33 complaints, 5 mediations, and a measly little 6 facilitations. And I won't bore you by going through all of the numbers, but I think it is important to look at those columns to see that hearings really haven't changed. Complaints have gone down, and they're about the same. Mediations have definitely gone up, but look at the numbers for facilitations. And certainly the numbers the last couple of years are skewed because of COVID. So I think you see that trend that generally goes up. And I hope, and it's been my experience, that facilitations do work, and they keep things from escalating into complaints, into hearings. And our goal is always with facilitations to try to help either mend relationships between parents and school teams that are going south, or just to have good, healthy conversations in those IEP meetings. So here is the information for the dispute resolution webpage. You can find them here. There's lots of good information on there, but don't ever hesitate to call Emily or Kimberly. They're always more than happy to take your calls and direct you to where to find the appropriate information, because this process, it can be complicated, and there's so much information out there, but Emily and Kimberly can help guide you down to find exactly what you're looking for. So let's talk a little bit about facilitation. So facilitation is a process offered from the State Department to help special education teams reach agreements and decisions related to a student's IEP. IEP teams may benefit from a skilled and capable facilitator who can help teams, get better at working together, help solve problems, or better just understand and communicate together as a team. Please know that the facilitator is always neutral. They're not a member of the team. They're not on the parent side. They're not on the school district side, but they're certainly on the child side. They're there to make sure that the conversations stay focused on what's best for the child, and to help the IEP teams make good decisions. They're not, and the facilitator is not part of the decision-making process. They're just there to help the team get through the process together. And there is no charge for facilitation for either the district or a parent. It's a free service. So here on the web, this is on the website where you would see where you could go to request facilitation. And there's the form that you might print out. I guess I would always say, I think it's a good idea to reach out to either Emily or Kimberly in advance of filling out the form, just so they know and can help kind of guide you in what you might be looking for in terms of facilitation. So next is mediation. And again, mediation is another voluntary process like facilitation, where a trained SDE neutral third party provides some structure for parents in the districts to identify points of agreement. And that's always the focus, is to work on what are the things that we can agree on. Mediation always aims to build positive working relationships and encourage mutual understanding, and help focus again on that common understanding of the student. Again, for mediation, the real difference in mediation and facilitation is that in a facilitation, the entire IEP team is there to make decisions, and the facilitator's there to help guide that process. With mediation, it's not always the full team. In fact, we usually encourage no more than 3 members of each on the parent side or the school district side to be there, and to really be laser focused on, what are those issues and what are we going to mediate, and to come out with a good outcome. The next process, kind of moving up the food chain, would be to file a state complaint. So any individual or organization alleging any violation of IDEA can file a complaint with the State Department. And again, I would encourage you to reach out to Emily or Kimberly to see, is your concern something that you can file a state complaint. Sometimes the office would get a call that, well, I just don't like that teacher, or I don't like that para or something. Well, that's not something that a complaint can be filed about. But if there is a violation of IDEA, then a state complaint could be filed, and then the state would open up an investigation. They would assign a complaint investigator to interview you, interview members of the school, and find out what's going on, and then see if, in fact, there were some violations that happened, and then they would put together, a corrective action plan to make things right. And then, most importantly, from the perspective of the State Department, is to help the school districts get it right. And as I've been involved in these processes, oftentimes it's just the school districts may just not have understood something correctly. And so the job of that complaint would be to help them understand that and start doing it right moving forward. Again, moving up that ladder, and this you can see from that chart earlier that 3 or 4 or 5 of these due process hearings are requested in Idaho. But if you believe that an allegation has happened and you want to move it up to the due process hearing, certainly here's the information where you can look at to see more about it. So as I mentioned earlier, the dispute resolution is always open and available to help parents understand the process. If you have questions that you're just not comfortable with talking with the school district, please reach out to them. They'll help you with that. And on the same side, they're also there to help school districts too. Special education is complicated. There's no doubt about it. And the office gets calls from teachers and special education directors on a regular basis to help them with the process as well. So please don't hesitate to reach out to them for any questions or understandings that you might need. I'm going to move on with Karen's part of the presentation, which is Medicaid School-Based Services. I don't profess to be an expert on this, so I'm going to do the best I can to share some of the information that Karen had. Her information will be listed later. Please reach out to Karen directly if you have some questions, or through Michelle. So it's often asked, how do schools pay for special education services? And it's kind of a mixture of funds. There's federal dollars that come in, there's state money, there could be local monies that are spent on it. And then there is some reimbursement from Medicaid School-Based Services to help offset some of those health-related costs that we're going to talk about. So Susie, I think, has done a great job of explaining IEP. So we're going to move on from that slide and go right into IEP services and Medicaid services. So the IEP is always written to meet the student's individual academic or behavior needs. It's never written around Medicaid or to maximize Medicaid billing. And, I always like to say that never the two shall these meet. It's always the IEP first. And then if there are some services that Medicaid can be billed to pay for, then we would have that discussion. There's a one-time parental, one-time consent to bill Medicaid that you might receive at your first IEP meeting. And all that does is it gives the school district permission to bill Medicaid. It doesn't mean that they automatically will. It's just that consent to do that. They just need that on file for them. So this is a list of the school-based services that are most often billed that we see, certainly in Idaho. Speech language therapy is number one, occupational therapy another one. Any of the assessments or evaluations could be Medicaid billable, or any of the habilitation intervention services that are listed here. Some other billings that are commonly billed could be physical therapy, transportation, interpretive services, those kind of things. What school-based services are not, they are not educational services, they're not academic instruction, it doesn't include tutoring or recreational, vocational, or inpatient services. It's evaluations for educational purposes only. And again, here is Karen's information. If you have questions about school-based Medicaid services, please reach out to Karen. She has a ton of information and knowledge about it, and would be happy to help you with that. And again, if you have any questions, please email Michelle at the email that we listed earlier. She will get those to Susie and I and Karen, and then we will certainly get those back out to you. And I will take my opportunity to say thank you very much for participating. Again, sometimes this IEP and special education process can be convoluted and confusing, but please know there are resources out there to help you, whether it be at your school or through the Office of Dispute Resolution.
Absolutely. I also just wanted to say that one of the things that Jeff said during his presentation is sometimes a school, a teacher, or a school district just isn't familiar with the practice, or maybe it's something that they've always done in a certain way. And when we find out as a school district that we have been doing something not appropriately, or we need to fix it, it's just a really good opportunity and a good training opportunity to make sure that we are doing things in the right way. And also, I just wanted to thank you for attending this session, and wanted to reiterate, if you have any questions at all, we are more than happy to answer those questions. And I think there's another slide here for resources that we put some links. Oh, sorry, there are some Medicaid questions that Karen went through and answered, so we can kind of quickly go through those, and you can read those on your own. And then there are some resources that we used for this presentation. And then at the, towards the end, the last slide just has some links to some resources as a parent that you can review or find. Often when parents ask me a question, one of the very first things I do is make sure I'm giving an accurate and correct answer. And I'll click on that special education manual link probably 10 times a week. And I've been doing this job for 25 years just to make sure that I'm giving the correct information back. And then there are, we have a group called Idaho Cesta, and they work through the Boise State University, and they support buildings and parents and teaching teams regarding processes and training. And so they develop a lot of great resources on the Idaho Training Clearinghouse site. And then there are also some other links here as parents that you can access if you have additional questions that we thought would be helpful to you. So again, thank you so much for your attending. And last time, again, we're more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. Have a wonderful day.
Okay, let me pull off the share screen there. Oh, it's not shared anymore. Got it. Okay. Okay. Thanks for hanging in there through that. That was a lot of information, I know. And as they said, they're happy to answer questions, but we have back with us Angela Lindig, Idaho Parents Unlimited, who has a lot of familiarity with all the information that was just presented. So if you do have any questions or would like any further discussion, we have that opportunity now. And I don't see any in my chat, but maybe what I'll do is, Angela, do you have any suggestions for topics that we should potentially give parents a little more information on at this point? Or
Oh, that's huge. And that was a lot of information in that presentation, but good information. Like what Jeff explained, we get those calls in our office. We work pretty collaboratively with the Office of Dispute Resolution at the State Department of Education, because we get the similar calls, and we will sometimes need to direct them to those resources. We have some of those resources on our website, but they point them right back to the State Department of Ed's website. So parents, I think, really understanding, one of the things that doesn't come up on this training, but we provide, is learning how to fully understand the IEP, how to read the IEP, know what the components are of the IEP. In fact, we last Friday were in Idaho Falls with parents dissecting the IEP, and it's not a PowerPoint presentation. It's truly, we go through the forms on the website and explain what each section is and why it's required, and then what should be in there. So parent concerns, parent input is a requirement. So it's not just that you're a member of the team, you're a required member of the team. And I think Susie had mentioned, parents can make requests. If it changes the IEP, then it requires a team meeting. I really do think that that's maybe the biggest thing, is parents frequently are not aware of really how to read and understand the IEP itself. And so that's where communication and conflict arise, right? I mean, where you have communication problems or breakdowns, because we're not, as parents, we find ourselves in this position of, oh, our child is eligible for special education. Now we're going to things called IEP meetings. We don't know what we're doing. We show up, with a table full of experts who do know what they're doing. And mostly know what they're doing, but there's a big learning curve there for us as parents. So that's really probably the biggest topic that we try to address in our office. And then everything else is very individualized.
Okay, I want to tell our participants that, as you heard Angela say, she was just in Idaho Falls working with people there on the breakdown of IEP meetings, etc. If that is something that our participants are interested in, please let IFF know that, or you can go directly to IPOL. But what I'm offering is that at IFF, we would actually just hire Angela to come do a session for us and for any of our parents out there who feel like this is something that would be helpful to them. So please let us know if you'd like something further on that, because that sounds like a wonderful opportunity.
We'd love to do that.
Yeah, that would be, I think that would be terrific. Also, we have two other questions. One is, what other programs like 504s are there similar requirements and rights?
Okay, so Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act is separate than the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So IDEA and 504 are within two separate laws. However, 504 plans are, so Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act essentially states, in a nutshell, that any federal program or any entity, anything that is receiving federal funding, must make reasonable accommodations for people with individuals with disabilities to access that program or that service. And that would include public education. And so if a child doesn't need specialized instruction, but they have a disability that requires them to need some accommodations in order to access their education, then those accommodations would be put into a plan called a 504 plan. 504 plans do not have the same requirements as an IEP does. So for instance, there's no requirement for a team meeting. There's no requirement for, it's actually not even required to be put in writing, but of course that's certainly best practice that any accommodations being given are noted and in writing. But when there is a problem with 504 accommodations potentially not being followed, that typically that's not going to go through your Office of Special Education or dispute resolution. You're going to need to go to your 504 coordinator within your school or school district, but your school 504 coordinator most frequently is going to be the school counselor or potentially the school principal. So it's not a special education service, so that's why it doesn't go there. Now, in those options for dispute resolution that Jeff talked about, facilitation, mediation, those kinds of things, you can request facilitation for a 504 meeting, but you make that request at your district within your school district. And to be totally fair, they might not all know that. Districts might not all be aware of that. So if somebody did want to explore that further, let me know. I should also tell you, Section 504, the rules, the regulations are being opened up for the first time since 1977, and potentially being revised for and open for public comment. So you be on the lookout for that kind of information. So because I think that could create some really good change.
Angela, a couple other things. One that tail ends off that, are there any other programs besides 504 IEP that parents should know about?
For special education?
Yeah, related to.
Gosh, I'm aware of.
I'm not aware. And if you're not aware right off the top of your head, then I'm going to say the answer to that is no, because
well,
you've already run circles.
Yeah, no, I mean, you've got your options, of course, of how your child is receiving their education. There's, so confusion, there's information around, okay, you can homeschool your child, and then you don't have rights under IDEA or 504 when you're choosing to homeschool. That's if you're choosing to homeschool. If your child goes to school at home and they're learning, through a virtual learning accredited public school, but they're at home, that's not being homeschooled. Then they would have access to special education and or even 504 accommodations, depending on what those are and what the needs are of the child. And then there's private schools. Then private schools are not, unless they're federally funded, they are not falling under those categories. Now, many private schools will offer special education, but they are not required to under IDEA, unless the child is placed in a private school by the school district, at which point they would then fund that. So there's some it's complicated, but no, there's not a separate program. And also too, just to dovetail off of that, charter schools are public schools. So I hear that term thrown around a lot, like, well, the charter schools, people think that they're private schools. They're not. They're public schools, and they provide special education and related services as well.
Great, thanks for that. And then this question is interesting. The presenters stated that Cesta is available to parents, but from my experience and others, that is not accurate. What can Cesta do for parents? And maybe just remind people what Cesta is.
But Cesta is the Special Education Support and Technical Assistance. And I think Susie mentioned they're through Boise State, but they're also through the U of I. And Cesta is a TA center, technical assistance center for educators, for schools, for districts primarily. But they do have some services for parents. So in fact, we worked with them over the last 2 years to create a lot of resources for parents on their website and through the Idaho Training Clearinghouse. So there's fact sheets, there's webinars, there's a lot of parent information that they provide. As far as one-to-one direct assistance, like you would call if you wanted to go to one of their trainings, that there are some trainings that could be open to parents to attend, but the person writing that is correct. They are primarily a support for schools and districts. But check them out on the Idaho Training Clearinghouse and their resources, idahotc.com is that. and you can find where they do have a number of parent resources and where they've partnered with us over the last couple of years to provide those.
All right, we have time for one final question, and that's what we have at the moment, so that's great. What about kids that have health issues and have to miss a lot of school? In this parent's case, it's affecting her work now. Hold on, I'm going back to it. And it didn't in the past, but my daughter has a 504 right now, but I think she needs an IEP. Is that sort of a normal progression with a?
We see that a lot. So a parent can put in a request for an assessment for special education at any time. We have a form. Again, there's a request for assessment on our website under our education tab, but it's also, you can find those on the special education forms on the state Department of Education's website as well. So if a parent thinks that their child is going to be eligible for special education for whatever reason, they can begin that assessment process. And if they need help with that, we can help with that. So
Yeah.
As far as missing school, we see a different common question that comes up is schools are not wanting to or wanting to actually charge the student with truancy for missing too much school. So we actually have we have a link. I have a guidance email that I put together that I use frequently that gets parents links to the appropriate information on what to do in that case. So there are options for, yeah, in that link, it gives options for how to advocate on behalf of your child for their education when they are missing school. But as far as it causing the parent to miss work, that's a different conversation entirely.
Yeah.
And so then you start talking about, is this child eligible for things like homebound instruction or potential, in-home services that way. So
Yeah. So I think this is a good place to wrap. As you all can tell, Angela and her staff at iPoll, Idaho Parents Unlimited, easy to find, Google, they are a wealth of information. So if you have children for which you have some school concerns, they are your go-to. Angela, thanks so much for handling this Q&A piece. You obviously
Absolutely.
had gobs of knowledge for us. And we needed you today, and we really appreciate it. And I will remind everybody that our next session starts at 1 p.m. This is the one about complaints and how they can really actually be a good thing. But as Angela and other speakers have already alluded to, you got to know how to make an effective complaint. So that session is completely related to the YES system of care and how the complaint system within YES operates. We've got a couple of great speakers, a parent and lawyer combo, who are very well versed in that system. And so come back and join us for our final session today. And we'll look forward to seeing you at 1.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks again,
Bye.
Angela. Bye all.